I can't, but he can. We've all been trying to fill this hole inside. We got to fill it with God, or we're going to keep filling it.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Raised and Redeemed podcast and YouTube channel. I'm your host, Michaela Nikolenko, and I started this show after finally finding my home in Christ. I grew up in a home with lots of abuse and addiction where Christianity became something that repelled me. I spent my early adulthood seeking God in other religions, tarot cards, psychedelics, and even myself. I didn't realize how much hell I had pulled up into my life until I came face to face with the dark side of the spirit world, and Jesus fought hard to save me. Now I live to serve His will and host a platform where others can share their story too. If you're looking for a show that talks about real things and provides encouragement for those who have been to the dark side and back, this is the show for you. Make sure to rate, subscribe, and share this show with anyone that you feel might be encouraged by it too. Thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to the Raised and Redeemed family. Hey you guys, and welcome back to the Raised and Redeemed podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Michaela, and today I have on somebody who is very near and dear to my heart. Her name is Mady Lona, aka Mady Overmeyer, and we've been friends for many years, pretty much since infanthood. So we grew up struggling with a lot of the same things, we're in a lot of the same places, and I've gotten to watch Mady's redemption all the way from the depths of addiction to now where she is as an amazing mama, wifey, and on the horizon of finishing nursing school. So today, Mady shares some behind the scenes of what it was like living that fast life, all the destruction and chaos and pain of that, and the way that God just continued to preserve her life along the way. Okay, I'm in editing mode, and there's just one more thing I want to preface before we get started, and that's that Mady wouldn't necessarily consider herself a born-again believer or believer in Jesus or the Bible, but she has been working through the 12 steps and on a journey of seeking God, and as she goes into in this show, seeking something higher than herself. And based on what Scripture says, if you seek me with all your heart, you will find me, and I believe that she's well on her way. So just so you guys know, I know that most of the guests on the Raised and Redeemed show are born-again believers, and I myself am a born-again believer, but that doesn't mean that all of my guests will be. So without further ado, let's get on to the show. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Mady. Just so the listeners have a little bit of background, we've been friends forever. It's one of those friendships that we could not talk to each other for like 5 years, and then we'd talk the next day, and it would be as if nothing ever changed. So I have you on the show today because your story is one that just really inspires me. We came from the same place, struggled with parents or a parent that was into the same sort of things, and I know just what that led you into in your life, and so I want to hear about your redemption story because you've done a complete 180 just in struggling with addiction, and now like your whole like wifey, mama, you're finishing school, like you're doing all the things. So I'm just, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I want to just start with how you got into everything you got into, and if you wouldn't mind like telling just the story of what that was, because honestly, I'm excited to hear too, because we were in college at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we both started to fall off around the same time, but I feel like you went harder and faster
Mm-hmm.
in the substance sort of direction. So I would just like to hear like what you think led into all of that.
Yeah, so I think like all of it, like I think from the very beginning, like when I was young, like I had these alcoholic tendencies, and these this addictive personality, like whether it was with like attention from like boys or my dad or just whoever in my life at that, friends even, like I would do anything. I mean, we both did it.
We were the same.
Like changing underwear and changing clothes in the girls' bathroom, like to fit in, because I wanted to be like everybody else.
Yeah.
In middle school, and like even in elementary school, I think like I always had this like tendency to just like feel different and feel like I needed to fit in and all of these things, which is like now I know like is all just part of like my isms, my alcoholism, my addiction, like all the things, I think, so I think it started then. And then like eventually, like, when we were like 11, I think, I don't know if you were there, but I know we hung out at the same places, and like we probably took our first drinks together, like
Yeah.
our first few drinks, like we took together. And like
Yep.
that is when it started, like I didn't know at the time, but like ever since then, I was chasing that first drunk or that first high that I got, And I
Yes.
think maybe at first, when I first did it, it wasn't like because I wanted to drink. I didn't know what it was really. I just wanted to fit in. But
Mm,
then, and mind you, I have an alcoholic father, I
yeah.
mean, you knew my dad growing up. So, like, I knew what alcohol was, I knew what it did. I watched my dad get drunk, but I did it. That's not why I did it. I did it more, I think, to fit in. And then once I did it, I got that feeling. And it was like that first feeling was like, oh. And then all of a sudden, I didn't care. I didn't care about fitting in. I didn't care what I looked like. I didn't care, And from the beginning, I was blacking out. Like from
Yeah.
the beginning, I was a blackout drinker. And like I think that's to say something, not everybody blacks out. If you do black out, like there might be an issue. All the time is a little bit different. Most people like they black out and they're like, "Oh, I shouldn't drink like that again." Like I need to learn my limits. I never did that. I was like, "Oh, let's see how far I can push it."
Did you feel like when you were drinking, like because for me, I think I would black out because I wouldn't notice I was even ever buzzed. I wouldn't think I was ever buzzed until I was blacked out. And then,
Mhm.
and then it was too far gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think I remember, like I have this memory of you and I in a cabin, and like they handed us like a gallon of Kamchatka, of vodka.
Yeah.
And both of us just like chugged the entire gallon and it was just like done. And like before, I don't even think we had a minute to feel the buzz. Like it was just
Yeah.
instantaneous that I was like, I need to get to where I want to be and I'm not going to take my time doing it, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's what led into the drugs because, I drank with my dad, I drank with you guys, like I drank with all of my friends, I drank alone. And then eventually, like when I got into high school, I experimented with some drugs, but not the same drugs, like marijuana, like
Yeah.
other, which is like good for some people, like totally support it. But like for me, no. Like even that I take to the extreme. Even that, like I take to the extreme and I have to do it all the time because I have this addictive personality. And then when I got into college, like my dad had gotten arrested. So my dad's in prison now. I'm on my own. I have this, I mean, my mom, love her so much, but she was so worried about me all the time that like I was constantly grounded or I was constantly like
Yeah.
on this like leash, And
Yeah.
I think like, she supported me going far away from school, but I think she would have preferred me to stay home. And then like I finally got this like little bit of freedom.
Yep.
And it was like bam.
An
Like
animal out of the cage.
yes.
Yeah.
It was like I'm out, I'm free. But then I started experimenting with other stuff. I started hanging out with, I was always hanging out with older kids. Even you were too. Like we were always hanging out with older kids. Even in high school, as like an eighth grader, I was hanging out with freshmen. I was a freshman, I was dating a senior. Like
That's what I was going to say, Maddie, is like the kids that we grew up with that were older than us, they were drinking. So once again, to fit in, we wanted to be drinking because they were. We wanted to be hanging out with them, doing what they were doing.
mhm.
And so yeah, the older kids.
Yes.
Exactly.
So I think like it was the older kids. And then when I got into college, like I was this older kid. I was the older kid and I got a fake ID, I could do basically whatever I wanted, however I wanted.
Yeah.
But then it got to a point where like alcohol was kind of like an issue, like took longer to get there. It took longer to get to where I wanted to go. It took more to get to where I wanted to go. And then I found drugs, whatever, it did not matter. Like you name it, I've done it for the most part. If it was available, I've done it. And like, so I got into these drugs. Well, first I got into like pills and stuff, like
Yeah.
pills were the first thing because like I was in college and I wanted to stay up and I wanted to like be able to
Mm,
party and all of the things. And then that wasn't enough. And then I started getting really to a point where I was doing drugs just way too much. Like I was doing them way too much and I couldn't afford it anymore. Like
mm,
I didn't grow up with money, like that was never a thing. My mom was a single mom, my dad's in prison, well my mom was remarried at the time but still, like she had 5 kids.
yeah.
5 kids. So like she did the very best she could and she did a great job, but like we didn't have a lot of money. So I'm going to school on financial aid and I'm trying to work while I'm in college, and I just didn't have the money, so then I'm trying to keep up with this habit that I've now created,
Mm.
and I have no money. So then I start selling my body.
Oh
I
yeah.
start selling my body while I'm in college, and then I'm selling my body while I'm in college to pay for the stuff that I want to do, and then I'm using more because I'm selling my body, because of the shame and the guilt that's associated with that. So then I think like I got like one semester. I think I even went and visited you while I was in college, and you were like, I was like looking for stuff, wanting to do all the things, and you were like, whoa, like you're a little.
Yeah, I remember thinking you were even more extreme because, like, I was just more so boy crazy at that time. I just wanted to be where the boys were at. But I feel like, yeah, you were looking for the goods.
Mm-hmm. You were looking for the boys, and I was looking for the goods, and like that's
Yeah.
like we both had our own addictions at the time.
Oh,
It just
amen.
was, yeah, so different.
Yeah.
Um, so and at that point, like I didn't. I mean, of course, I was like sleeping around with people, like aside from like my side job that I had. Like I was sleeping around with people, but it like never brought me any comfort. I didn't want anybody to put this expectation on me to like act a certain way, so I didn't want that. But after like my freshman year of college, like I talked to my mom, I was failing out, and she was just like, maybe you should come home, and I was like, yeah, I think you're right. Like, and I used that as like, but like most of my friends that I was using with were back home. Like I was going to Indy in college and then driving back home and doing my thing on the weekend and then going back.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I was going to say that too, like going back to the root of like fitting in. I was going to ask how much of it has to do with like the town we're from. Um,
Mm,
because it seems like addiction is just so rampant there and nobody sees it as an issue. Like people drink all the time, they do drugs all the time. And like it's just seen very, very casual. So I
yeah.
don't know how much of it has to do with our town.
When I first got sober, I think that I thought that like all of it had to do with our town, and like 1000% people, places, and things. Like
Yeah.
if I'm staying around the same people and staying around the same places, the same things are going to happen. But like I also like know that I'm an addict and I'm an alcoholic, and like wherever I go, I bring those two things with me, you
Mm,
know? Um
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're the common denominator,
yeah,
right?
I'm the common denominator. Like I can, like for sure, like I think it wasn't like back home it's not stigmatized. Or it is, but it's
It's
not.
right.
It
Exactly.
is, but it's like not, like I used with people. The first people that I used and got drunk with are like in college, graduated college, doing all the things, like
Yep.
absolutely no issues,
Same
you
with
know?
me. Like I was still doing all the things, but I was also still able to get straight A's and be functional, so nobody ever thought I had a problem.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like I I was just like, and I remember like being so mad at people. Like people that we went to high school with, because at this point in time I'm not hanging out with a lot of people that we went to high school with. It's different people. But I remember being so angry at the people we went to high school with because I heard that they were like saying X, Y, and Z about me. And I'm like,
Mm.
you're I used with you.
Yeah.
Like I drank with you. Like what are you talking about? But like now I see it, and I see it all the time. Like there's a group of people, and like they start off together and they start off drinking together, and then they grow up. Some grow up and some stay in the same cycle. Like I think out of that group of us, like a few of us have been to jail. A few of us have like went down just crazy paths, and then some of us had absolutely no issues.
Right.
And I think like for people who don't have addictive personalities and like alcoholism, I'm so happy for you. Like I would never wish that upon anybody, but like I think it's also like something that like we can talk about. Then I moved back home, and when I got back home, like I started, I had dropped out of college. I started working at a factory, third shift, and like it all went downhill from there. I started dating this guy who like I knew in the past, and we
Yeah.
really had this grand scheme together about how we were going to do things and just this and that, and like it just got bad real fast. Like I was using with my little sister,
Yeah.
and like kids. I was now that adult that was like hanging with the kids. And like that is probably my deepest regret. But like thank God like I am now able to make those amends and like be able to just forgive myself by just being present in
Yeah.
their lives.
And by being different, by you being different, by you living out your transformation, like
Hmm.
you're showing them that there's something better and it's not what you guys were living before.
Hmm. Yeah. So, and like at this point, I'm like completely gone. Like my mom's completely worried about me. Like I got kicked out of her house because, or kind of, I really don't know what happened there. I don't remember. It's all fuzzy, but kind of got kicked out of her house, went and lived with my aunt, and then was working third shift. So like I could play this role really good because like nobody sees me.
Mm,
I'm like sleeping during the day, which is like perfect for what I was doing, sleeping during the day, up all hours of the night,
yeah.
sleeping during the day, and then I lost weight so fast, just like all the things. And at this point, I'm barely even drinking. Like alcohol has like no longer like sufficed, like it
Yeah.
would, if that's all that I could get, it would, but like now I'm doing other things and other substances.
I remember you driving one time and us being on the phone together, and I remember like a cop being behind you or something, and like you were like, "I gotta go," and I was just so afraid. I knew you were really living the fast life at that point, and it had gotten really dark.
hmm There was a few times that I was like, I should have been arrested.
Yeah.
I should have been arrested. I hit a deer once in the middle of day, like while I was completely out of my mind. And like, I was a person when I was younger, like 16, once I got my car and like got my first job, because like I always worked hard. That is one thing. Like, I always worked hard. I always worked for my money because we didn't have much. Like, we
Yeah.
had enough. We had enough, and I had more than enough, but like, it never was enough.
Yeah, I
um,
get
it wasn't what everybody else had. So like I
yeah.
worked hard for my money and I took pride in that. My mom made me pay my own bills, all the things. And I got in this accident while I was high out of my mind, hit this deer in the middle of daylight, and like Pearston. And like the Pearston officer came over, and like I was like, oh no, like he's gonna know. But like he didn't say anything. He just was like, are you okay? And I drove on home. But like I was so out of my mind that like I just gave my car to my sister, like went without a car for a while. I traded my sister cars because I didn't want to pay the insurance
Mhm.
on it.
Mhm.
And then like shortly after that, like I found out that like the cops were watching me.
Oh, wow.
I had gotten like pulled over quite a bit, but nothing, like no searches or nothing. But I had been getting
Think
pulled over quite a bit.
Do you think they were playing the long game with you then?
I think so, probably because like I'm a small dog, like I was a very small dog.
Yeah.
But like I found out because like my sister got in an ex. I was living in Fort Wayne at the time, like dating this guy, doing the things, dating this guy, living in his grandma's roof, like or her upstairs, like
I remember.
yeah. And like so side note, I was like I didn't know how bad I had really gotten, and she like had me like stand on her countertop because she was installing something, and she was like, "You're so light, you can't even weigh down this countertop," you know.
Mm,
It was just like an aha moment for me.
yeah,
That was like, oh, I've really gotten bad, but like I didn't care. I also had an eating disorder for a long time. So like I'm doing stuff that's making me lose weight. Like I'm happy on that too. It like
right.
fed all these things. But anyways, so my sister got in an accident. It was like I think it was I don't know. It wasn't wintertime, but she fell off on the dirt road, like went off.
Yeah,
Got
yeah.
in an accident. The cops came to the scene. They called my mom. My mom came to the scene, and the cops like said to my mom, we're gonna have to search your daughter's vehicle. And she's like, okay, go ahead. But I figured, and they were like, no, like you don't understand. Like one of the Overmeyer girls is suspected of dealing meth, heroin, and cocaine. And she was like, oh, well, it's not this daughter, it's this daughter.
She ratted you out?
She ratted me out. She ratted me out.
Your mom is such a, like, I want to say, I'm just going to say it, she's a badass.
Yeah, yeah. She's a G. She's like, nope, nope, nope.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's not this daughter, it's this one. Like, meanwhile, my sister is like 16 in a soccer uniform, like
Yeah,
going to school. She's like,
not
it's not
that
this.
one.
Yeah, not this one. You got the wrong one. And like,
Hmm.
also, my name was known around town, just
Yeah,
like yours was. Like they knew who I was. They
yeah,
knew who the Overmeyers were. So, because of my dad, like
exactly.
they knew there was this thing around our names. Sometimes we were treated better because of it, like, or sympathy. And
Mhm.
then sometimes it was like a little bit worse.
Yeah, yep, yep.
So she told him who I was. And then my sister calls me and lets me know that mom just ratted me out to the cops. And meanwhile, I'm getting ready to go do what I do and go make my sales during the day. And I'm like, oh no, I'm driving on an expired tag with a busted headlight. Like,
Yes, I
yes, all
remember
these things.
that. Yeah.
Yes, all these things. And I'm like, oh no, like I'm about to get arrested. And that was one thing that I had going for me was that I had never been arrested and I did not want to be arrested. And the guy that I was dating at the time had been arrested for the same thing. And he was like, "Oh, deuces, I'm out." And went to rehab.
Oh, really? He just dipped after that.
Hmm. Very short. Once he found out that like something was happening, and he also was like an addict and had issues, and like I think like he had already been to rehab once, and
Hmm.
like when he came into my life, I think it was like a perfect thing because I don't know that I would have gone to rehab had he not like told me that he thought it might be good for me. He dipped out, said he was going to rehab. I was like, "Okay, have fun. Like I think you should." But like I don't have a problem is what I said.
Mm.
So I dropped him off at the airport, I think, or maybe his mom did. I don't know what happened, but he went to the airport, and then I had to leave his grandma's house. I'm like living at his grandma's house. I got to figure out what I'm gonna do. My mom had mentioned rehab, but I wasn't ready to hear it. And then once he got to California, he called me and he was like, "Hey, you should really think about going too. Like, I think you would benefit from it, and then you can come out here where I'm at, like out in Cali, we can go to the same one, like all these things." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, you're right. Maybe I should, but like I don't think I have a problem." And so then I'm sitting there at this like I'm sitting at a light and I'm just like I have this bag of stuff, you know, and I'm like, "Okay, I can either just get rid of this, and no longer do it and call it quits now, or I can do the rest of it and then be done after that." But like in my mind, in that moment, I knew that there was no way. Like that last bag was never going to be enough without a solution to replace it.
Mm.
So I tried to run my car off the road. It didn't really work. I don't think I really wanted to kill myself, but like I thought I did, like it was like this whole thing, this whole
Wow.
dramatic thing that like, but I also think like God was there that was like, "I'm not done with you yet.
Mm.
Like I'm not done with you yet." And I had like came close, like my boyfriend at the time had overdosed like weeks before this, and I wasn't doing the same stuff as him, but I was like, "What on earth?" And
Yeah.
then I had like had this really weird thing where I don't know what it was, but like my whole body went numb and I thought I was dying. My heart was racing, like all of this stuff. It was just a weird, all these experiences that I was like, "I think I'm going to die soon."
Yeah.
And I think like God was just like, "I'm not done with you yet." So
It's
I go,
crazy to me how, like, you don't think it's a problem. Like, even, like, you're living these, like, horrific, like, instances that only, like, you would watch in a movie somebody who has a problem would be experiencing, but when you're living it personally, it's like you don't realize it's a problem until it's too late, usually.
mhm, yeah. I had no I mean, when I was younger and drinking and stuff, it was a problem. Like, it was a problem. Like, I was getting blackout and doing things that I would never do sober.
Yeah.
Like, I slept with a friend's boyfriend. I would never do that sober. Ever in my right mind would I do that. And I still owe an amends for that.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, just so many things that, like, I did while I was drinking or while I was trying to get that next drink or drug,
yeah.
that I never would have done. I just was never in my right mind. So I go home, I go to my mom's house and I pull in her house and I call her and I tell her, like, "I think I'm ready to go to rehab." And like, that was my first experience in rehab, not my last one, but it was my first one. And that time when I went to rehab, I thought that I was going to be going to California with him,
Mm.
and my mom was like, "No, no, I don't think that's the best idea. I think like if you two are meant to be together, you'll meet up after when you're sober."
Smart mama.
Smart mom, because like we weren't, like we were not. I think we had been, I don't know. I don't even think like I loved him. I thought I did at the time, but I don't think I ever did. I think that I loved the idea of having somebody
Yeah,
to be just as screwed up as I was.
yeah.
I didn't have to play this role. I didn't have to play the role of the good girl who has her crap together, because I dated a guy who I had to play the role of the good girl who has her crap together. And like, I hated it.
Because then you're challenged to be better. And
Hmm.
when you're like on that downward spiral, you don't want that. That's why my parents, they don't talk to me at all. They go completely ghost if they're spiraling because they don't want the accountability of having to be better for somebody.
Yeah, my dad does the same thing. It's like I remember him like catch the guy who like wanted me to be better, like catching me like doing drugs in his driveway and was just like, "You need to stop. Like I can help you," and I was like
Wow.
I was like, "Okay," and then like from then on I was like, not interested. Like I do not need anybody to save me.
Mhm.
Um So my mom decided I was going to rehab. She helped me get into rehab, like, and I ended up in Florida, you know. And I remember on my way to rehab being like so excited because I was leaving. I wasn't about to get arrested. Like I
Yeah.
was running. I was running from my life and I was excited about it.
Mhm.
Um, got into rehab and like detoxed and everything. And I learned a lot my first, I ended up getting 7 months sober, like, it was an amazing thing. Like, I had built this relationship with God, but, like, I met this guy, like, in
Yeah.
rehab at the time, and, like, I put all my focus on him. I grew up saving my dad. I grew up having to take care of my dad when he was drunk and doing the things, and trying to get him sober and all of this, and now I'm sober. I'm like a whole maybe 30 days sober at this point in
Yeah.
time. And I'm now dating this guy and he keeps relapsing. And I'm like, I can help you. I can help you.
Yeah. So your
Mhm.
focus was now shifted to somebody else and
Yes.
not on your own healing or recovery.
So as soon as I got out of rehab, I also had a really strong, like a really bad eating disorder at this point while I was in rehab because like now that the drugs aren't there to keep the weight off, like I need something, I need something and I need something to focus on,
Mm.
like I was always trying to fill this like God hole. Like
Yeah.
there's this God hole right here and I'm trying to fill it. I'm trying to fill it with men. I'm trying to fill it with drugs. I'm trying to fill it with food or without food, like with
Yep. Yep.
clothes, all the things, So I had this eating disorder and I was supposed to go to treatment. That didn't work out. Like I was going to treatment and then I couldn't, it was like Thanksgiving time, so they couldn't get me in, It was like a
Okay.
weird thing. Um,
I know
so I,
you ran away from rehab a time or two, didn't
yeah,
you?
yeah. So I go back and I'm in halfway house and doing like the IOP things and like going to 12-step meetings and stuff. And but I'm going to the meetings, right? And like, but my focus is on this guy. So I'm not working the steps. I'm not doing much about it. And he keeps relapsing or whatever. And it just is this whole situation. Then I built a relationship back with my dad. I hadn't talked to my dad for quite a while before I got sober the first time, like years, I want to say. I wrote him a letter because like that's like one thing that like the 12-step program has taught me is like forgiveness
Mm.
and like understanding, like not necessarily saying like what he did wasn't wrong, because like of course, he did a lot wrong,
Yeah.
but like understanding that he's a sick person,
Yes.
understanding like he's a sick person, I'm a sick person too,
Yeah.
and that I can forgive him for that. I can accept him as a sick person and understand that he did the best he could with what he had. Um,
Yes. And
which
then
I
you become free in that.
Mhm. And it's still a thing that I work on sometimes, but, like, lately, especially, like, I've just had this, like, freedom from my dad, I love him so much, but, like, this forgiveness and understanding and lack of expectation. Like, I
Yeah.
have no expectation on my dad to be a dad,
Yep.
Like, I don't expect I'm 24 years old, like, I'm okay. But with that, like, lack of expectation on him, like, I still give him, like, the respect to, like, allow him to be part of my life, and allow him in a way that's, like, safe for me, still protecting me
Yeah.
and my boundaries and my health, but, like, just understanding that he's a sick person and, like, he's gonna say wrong and he's gonna do wrong and he's gonna mess up, and, like, that's okay
Right.
because I've done it time and time again. The only difference between me and him is that I didn't have a kid. That is the only difference.
That's true. But also, like, you keep seeking to become better, and, like,
Mhm,
you do have a kid now, and, like,
mhm.
you would never you would never put him through that,
Right.
and I still struggle with my dad with that, like, that's been the most freeing thing is, like you said, releasing expectation, like, you can't expect him to be a dad, he's just never gonna be a dad. Um, but I noticed, like, when my dad gets better and he starts to recover a little bit, that hope comes back where I'm like, oh my gosh, like this could be something. Like he's going to be at my wedding. He's going to be a grandpa to my kids. Like
Mhm.
all these things I get really excited about. And then he falls down again. And then it hurts all over again. And, it's like this cycle. And I'm like, I already knew this. Like I already learned this to stop expecting. But like you also want to have hope because redemption is possible. Like your life, my life, like those are examples of the fact that redemption is possible. I just don't get why it doesn't seem to be that easy for some people, I
Mhm.
parents.
Yeah, for sure. I feel similar. I don't know if you know, but my dad's back in prison.
Okay.
So, my dad got out, right? Like a couple last
Yeah.
year.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so my dad got out last year. He met my son, like all the things, and then he relapsed and came and got clean with me about it, and like told me my dad has expressed that he's not interested in the 12-step programs. He doesn't think that they work. He thinks that they're garbage, like regardless of like what I show him, like, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to push that on him because I am not a walking perfect person,
Mhm.
like, and I think that like he's on his own journey, and like I can't push this on anybody. I can only help people who want to be helped. So I wasn't going to push that on him. I did suggest it a few times, but it wasn't. From there it was over. Like I'm not going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
Um, but he relapsed, got honest with me about it. My sisters were, of course, like they have their own different resentments against him. They aren't addicts like me. They're not an alcoholic like me, so they don't have the same kind of forgiveness like I do.
Yeah, that mercy.
And like I also have to not try to save my dad and say, "Hey girls, like maybe you should be a little easy on dad." You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, he relapsed. He didn't get arrested for that relapse. Like he didn't get caught. I don't know what happened. But um and then recently, like he drank and had to blow into a breathalyzer like hours later and got arrested. And like when my dad first got out, like I was so happy, like he, was sober, like he was trying to do the things like this and that, and then he relapsed. And then it was like this like pain inside that like I felt, but
Yeah.
I was like surrounded by sober women, sober, godly women when I found this information out, and they were just like, okay, you know, you do you trust in God? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Like whatever you got going on, give it to God, Like whatever you got going on, whatever these feelings are inside of you, give it to God.
Yeah, I'm inspired by the community that you've built up around yourself. I definitely see that as being something that's essential in coming out of a life like what we lived before.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I love that. Like all your group pictures, just like the village you've built around yourself. Hey, you guys, if you're in a relationship and trying to figure out if he's the one, or maybe you're recently single and taking a step back to figure out how to best go about finding the one, I have the ebook for you. Head over to the link in my bio or in the comment section from wherever you're listening to find my latest ebook, How to Know If He's the One. In this ebook, I share the worst of my relational mistakes and how Jesus finally showed me there was a better way. Gradually, he began to mend my heart, and I know he will do the same for you too. Okay, so we're nearing the part of the story where you got out of this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm in halfway house, and like I built this relationship back up with my dad. Kind of still like I was still very reserved at this point in time, but kind of, and then I wasn't really working a program. Like I was going to meetings and doing the things, but like I was still focusing on everything else,
Mhm.
you know. And then I was living in a halfway house with a bunch of women, right? So like me, and like I want to say three other women at the time. One, two, three, four other women at the time. And I had been living with these women for like 5 months at this time, probably. So like I built a relationship with them, like this like bond and this friendship. And I left the house one day and like my roommate, she was like older. but she was like a mother figure to me, like she was like that mom to me while I was there, made sure that I ate, like left candy on the counter.
Yeah.
Um, she left, or I left during the day and said bye to her, and I knew something was off with her. She had like thrown out my toothbrush or something, and I was like, "Hey, you threw out my toothbrush," and she was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get you a new one." And I left. I went to go get a tattoo. It was St. Patrick's Day. I came back home and found her dead. So she had died of an overdose, and I had no way to deal. I had no way to deal at that point in time. I ended up sleeping like on a park bench or something. Like, I don't even remember, but I was just like out of my mind. I went, I didn't use, I wanted to. I remember walking by a gas station and looking at the alcohol and being like, that looks really good right now, like that night. But I didn't that night. I ended up getting a job like a couple days, or maybe it was while this was going on. I already had this job, but like I was working at a pub and I
Okay.
was serving alcohol. I'm a sober person serving alcohol. And eventually, like, me and the boyfriend broke up. He was going back into rehab. My roommate had died. Like, just things were happening. And I was not okay. And eventually, that drink started to look good. I didn't drink at work, but I went out to lunch with a couple of friends. And one of those friends from rehab had relapsed. And I didn't have my fake ID anymore because, like, when I got sober, I cut it up as like I'm done drinking. I'm 20 at the time. I still wasn't even up to legal, or I was
Oh
19
my
at the
gosh.
time.
I
Yeah.
forgot about that.
Yeah, I was like 19 or 20. So I still wasn't even at the legal age to drink, and I'm already in rehab. I just remember like going out to this restaurant with them, and he ordered a drink. And then I was like, man, I can order a drink right now. Like, if God doesn't want me to drink and he thinks I'm an alcoholic, they're not going to serve it to me because I don't have my ID. Like that was my
Wow.
like justification.
Yeah.
My justification for it. My sponsor texted me at the time and was like, "Hey, do you want me to pick you up? I'll pick you up wherever you are and we can go to a meeting." And I was like, "No, I'm okay. I'm out with friends." Took that drink, and then next thing you know, I'm taking shots at the bar. And then next thing you know, I'm running through Pompano looking for drugs.
Wow.
Like it was that fast.
You know what this makes me think of too is how we're never put in a situation where God doesn't give us a way out. And your sponsor reaching out to you was definitely that.
Yes. 1000%. I'm like, God, if God wants me to drink, like he'll let that person serve me. Like, no, like God's not going to do it for me.
Yeah.
God's not going to do it for me. I have to be able to resist the temptation and trust what he puts in front of me.
Yeah.
And like he put that in front of me. That guilt that was in me, that was God. That was God saying, "Hey, like maybe you shouldn't do this."
Yes. Yes.
So I started drinking in Pompano. I come home, my house, like the person who owned the house, who I loved so much and had so much respect for, gave me a breathalyzer as soon as I walked in the door. That was another God moment. She was like, "Hey, I think you've been drinking." And I was like, blew into it. And she's like, "You have something to tell me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a little drunk." And she was like, "Okay, well, you can't stay here unless if you want to go back into inpatient." And I said, "Not going to do that." So I was going to go grab my things. And she was like, "I'll let you stay here. I'm going to let you stay here." Like, but like, it's really against the rules. And she let me stay there. Another God thing, like she was giving me that inch, that
Yeah.
little bit that I needed to like get back on track.
Mm.
Um, but at that point, like once you put that drink in you, like it's like I put that drink in me, and then all the like ways to get out of it wasn't a thought, like it was just the next drink, the next
Yeah.
drink, the
Yeah.
next, like that obsession of the mind. It was so, so bad. So I ended up saving up some money and booked a flight to go back to Indiana because I don't know how to use in Florida,
You
like
don't have the next.
yeah, I don't have the connects.
Yeah.
Pompano's a little sketch, and I was like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm going to go back to where I know I can manipulate and get my way.
Yeah.
So I went back to Indiana, used for a week before I lived in this like house, like that was basically a crack house, like lived in this house and used for a week before I even told my family I was home. And then I went to my mom's house, ripped all the tags off my luggage like a week later and was like, hey, mom, I'm home. Like, and like I was surprising her. Like I had just gotten
Uh-huh.
on the plane and I had not, and she knew. And a few days later, I got kicked out. I have a little sister. So at
Yeah,
the time, she was like 10 and she's like, no,
right. Yeah.
no, I'm not. I went through this with your dad. I'm not going through this with you, and kicked me out. And she gave me the option. You can stay here and not use, or you can leave. And I was like, I can't do that. So I'm going to leave.
I'm just surprised you didn't try to lie and like act like you were gonna be.
No, because at that point I had built a bond with my mom. Like I had this trust for her and this respect for her. Like that was another thing that like sobriety gave me, was like this respect and like this honest, like I don't know, I didn't want to. I also had like some guilt in me, and if I lived there I wasn't gonna be able to use the way I wanted to. I was gonna have a curfew. I was gonna be able to do what be able, and I was using all day and all night. So I ended up going back to this essentially crack house and living with this guy who I was friends with before and manipulated my way and became into a relationship with this guy. I wasn't really interested in him, but like,
Yeah.
you know,
He had,
I convinced myself that I was because he had what I wanted.
yeah.
And when I tell you the crazy stuff that happened in that house, man, like he was abusive, I was abusive, like it was just a hot mess. But like I would, we would get into a fight, an altercation, physical, and then I would leave and then I would come back. Like I can blame it all on him, but like I was chasing it just as much as he was giving it.
Yeah.
My relapse only lasted 1 month. 1 month and like a few days. And I had hit all of the bottoms that I thought I never would. I used in ways that I said I never would. I was virtually homeless. I had no car. I had no friends. I had no money. I had nothing at this point. The cops had arrested one of my friends, leaving the house to go cop for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, like, again, I was on the verge of like getting arrested. I was living off of like Fruity Pebbles and McDonald's McChickens, like they were still $1. I don't think that they are anymore, but they were still $1. And I was living off of like that. I was still on the like in contact with my therapist from Florida. Still kept contact with her. I kept contact with my dad. And one day I was using, and a man came over and we used together. And he said, hey, you're so and so's daughter, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, I used to get effed up with your dad. I was like, oh, I'm using with somebody that used to use with my dad.
Mm.
And that was like oh,
Who am I?
yeah,
It seems
yeah.
like.
That was like a moment that I was like, oh no, and my dad called me because he was calling me a lot from prison those days because he was worried about me.
Yeah.
And I told him who I saw, and he was like, what are you doing? You need to go to your Nana's house. I don't care. Go somewhere. Like you need to stop hanging out with the people that you're hanging out with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, of course, didn't listen to him. I was like, whatever, look at you.
Yeah.
Um, but very shortly after that, like, I don't really know what happened, but I got in a fight. Oh, I got in a fight with a guy, went to my friend's house, and thank God for that friend and her mom, because anytime that I got in a fight with him, that friend was there picking me up. I got to stay at her house. Her mom would tell me all the time how much like she knew that I was going to aspire to be. I
Mm.
just hadn't reached it yet. She was like, you have this, like, I know
She
you're
believed in you.
smart. Yeah, she had this hope for me. Not that like my mom didn't, but at that point in time, I was hiding all that I was doing for my mom. This woman was seeing me at my like very worst, and she was like letting me into her house, but I wasn't allowed there when they weren't there. So this day he had kicked me out, threw all my stuff out. I went to their house. She was like, you can't stay here while we're not there. Like, we don't, it's just they didn't trust me and I don't blame them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I called my sister. My sister came and picked me up. She was furious. My sisters, none of them could even look at me at this point. and went back to my mom's house. And I ended up stealing all the change in my family's house, in my mom's house.
Oh my gosh.
Ben's change jar, like my sister's change jar, stole my sister's car and went to Fort Wayne to try to go cop and got what I needed and then went into a psychosis. My mind was completely messed up. I had no idea where I was or whatever. And my mom found me and my sister took her car back, gave me a hug, and I couldn't figure out why they were all crying. I was like, you guys are being so dramatic. I'm fine. And I get in my
Mm.
mom's car and I think I fell asleep. I really don't know what happened, but I think I fell asleep. And I woke up like an hour or so later and I was like, where are we going? Or I was like, where are we? And she's like, we're in Michigan. I was like, what are we doing in Michigan? She's like, we're going to the airport. You're going back to rehab. I was like, I am not. I am not. And she was like, yes, you are. And I was like, absolutely not. I was like, you haven't even given me a chance to get sober here. Like all high and mighty. And she's like, okay, like, no. So then she calls my grams and I convince my grams that I should be able to stay. And mom's like, okay, hanging up on grams.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She calls my stepdad who like raised me. She calls my stepdad and he's like, if she doesn't want to go, don't make her go. Like, it's not going to work, because at that point he was just fed up. He'd
Yeah.
watched my mom go through the ringer with me.
Yep.
And he was just like, if she doesn't want to go, it's not going to work. She has to be willing. But my mom didn't listen. And like, I got on that plane and I went to rehab and it happened to be the same. It was a different rehab, but it was the same people that worked in my old rehab that were working there.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So I get there and the first 2 weeks were awful. I was, I really experienced like what it was like to not want to be there and to hit this bottom. I had virtually nothing, and I was just miserable, like all the skill, and I was so miserable. And I wouldn't call my mom, I wouldn't talk to her. It took me a while. It took me like, I was inpatient for like 3 months, and like usually it's 30 days. Like I was inpatient for 3 months because I was just so out of my mind, like insane and just so angry. But about 3 months in, I came to this point where like I didn't want to live anymore, but like I didn't know what else to do. And like I was on all the kinds of medication. I took this medication and I had this plan. Like I was storing this medication. I had this plan that I was going to try to kill myself. And my therapist found out and put me back inpatient instantly. Another God moment.
Yeah. He just keeps protecting you left and right.
Left and right. And I think like he works in so many people. I know he does. So I go back inpatient and then I meet one day this man walks in and it's my now fiance. I did the thing though where like I was focusing on a man and
Yeah.
like I did that thing. Thank God this time like I had a strong enough like connection with God. And not that it was strong. It wasn't that strong. But I
Yeah.
had a strong enough connection with God that I was able to see like, okay, I need to like do something. Um, but got into a relationship with this guy in rehab and finally was like, okay, I'm just gonna give the steps a chance. Gave the steps a chance and like once he was able to leave, he was court ordered to rehab. Like, and
Wow.
I was like, ooh, you're my kind of guy.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know? Ankle bracelet, check.
yeah. Was he taking the steps serious at that point? Like, did
He had actually already had more time sober than I did, even. So he got sober in March and I got sober in June. He had just moved from he was court ordered for a set amount of months to go to rehab. So like he came there after he was done at the other rehab type of thing.
Okay.
So he had already like been working the steps and doing the things.
Yeah.
And he had been through this gig many times.
Yeah. His stories are fascinating too, just based on the couple that I've heard.
So he ended up we were in this relationship thing, like everybody advised against it. And honestly, I would advise against it,
Yeah.
like because I think there was a point in time that like it very well could have taken me out. He was going back to where we live now, and I was going with him. So I am barely sober. I was, see, June, July, August, September, October, November. I was 5 months sober, and I'm moving in with this guy.
Oh my
You
gosh.
know? So I moved to this area and we were going to meetings. He was on house arrest virtually. It's community control here, but basically house arrest without the ankle bracelet. And so he was just going to work, going to meetings, and that was it. We didn't have a car. Luckily, we did have a house. Like he had a house, and so I moved in with him. And there came a point in time when we were together. I was happy, but and we were going to meetings, but I was just miserable inside. Like I didn't want to die, but I didn't really want to keep living the way I was living.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to do something. And so I finally, after a few months of living here, asked somebody to be my sponsor and started working the steps. It's funny because the person that I picked because she had a record and she'd been to prison and all
Yeah.
the things. And she is the most godly person I have ever met in my entire life. Like, and she is probably the best person that could have, because she'd been through a lot of things that were similar. And she took me through the steps. There's 12 steps in the program and the programs, and all of them are the same essentially. And it's all leading you to God, all of them. They're all meant to lead you to God and this relationship with God, because I can't, but he can. We've all been trying to fill this hole inside. We got to fill it with God, or we're going to keep filling it with
Yeah.
other things, and then it's going to get back empty. So, and she helped me build this relationship with God. And I was on my knees praying every single day, and I was doing the things. And then slowly but surely, I was happy again.
Wow.
Um,
It's kind
yeah,
of like eating healthy though, right? Where it's like you have to do it every day. Like you've got to do it every day to feel like I know I need to seek him every day. Otherwise, like I'm going to be losing my marbles.
yes. It's funny because even still today, right? So today, for example, when I woke up, I didn't pray, I didn't do the things, I still fall short sometimes. And
Yeah.
I have a 2-year-old, and he love him so much, but today was just one of those days
Yeah.
where he was cranky, I'm cranky, and I'm having just one of those days. And I'm finally I texted my friend and I was just like, what can I do? What can I do to calm myself? Because I'm getting mad, and I don't want to get mad at my 2-year-old.
Yeah.
He's two. Um, he's two. I don't want to get mad at him and his little emotions that he doesn't even know about. Um, and she's gave me a list of things, and the last one was did you pray about it? You know, did you pray about it? Did you give it to God? And that's the relationships that I have in my life today. All of my friends, if I call them with a problem, it's did you pray about it?
Yeah.
You
Oh
know?
my goodness, that's so good. That's what we need, like all the friendships that just like enable and let you get away with whatever you want. Like that's not love. That's
Mm-mm.
not love. Love isn't going to let you do those things and destroy yourself.
Yes. And that's something that I had to learn too, because I said, I had this resentment against all the people that I used to use with and this and that. And some of them, they were just trying to help me. And they were just telling me hey, I think you're not okay. But I was so angry with them. But they were showing me love.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah. Well, that brings me into my last question here, really, and that's what you would go back and tell yourself then, slash think of like a young woman like you. And a theme I get from your story too is like you didn't think you had a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't think you had a problem just over and over and over, like, throughout the whole span of it. So I don't even know what you could tell somebody in that position. Like that's really hard. So if you could think of anything that might have gotten through to you at that time or meant something to you, what would it have been?
Um, I think even though I would say I didn't have a problem at the time, I would still try to control the things in different ways. I would say I'm only going to do this much today and this and that. And what I would tell myself is people who are trying to normal people don't have to control their drinking. Normal people don't have to control their drinking. Normal people don't have to say, "Okay, I'm just going to have one glass." You know,
Wow.
like they're not telling themselves that, like they're not like really trying to work themselves up for that. I would tell myself that. And I would also tell myself, like, you're not done yet. You are not done yet. And just watch for the God moments,
Mm.
watch for the God moments as they come. Because I think like that was one thing that somebody told me was just to watch for the God moments once I got sober. And then I looked back and I was like, man, there were so many.
Mm. The unfortunate thing is we tend to not notice those God moments until we're looking in hindsight.
Hmm.
So the trick is to figure out how to see it when it's happening.
Yes. I now I think I do a little bit of a better job at it, like I like to think I do. Sometimes it's still hindsight, but like I still think that I try to do a better job at it.
I
I don't
also think LJ saved your life. Like, I think you needed somebody to love and care for. And like, you always grew up caring for all your little siblings. And I feel like as you got older and more independent and you didn't have anybody to take care of, you just like went crazy. Like, nobody was depending on you. You didn't have to be anything for anybody. And
yeah.
so it just like God's timing and all of that. Like, and I say the same thing about how so when I met V, I was kind of going through a 12 step, but for the adult children
Hmm.
version.
Yep, I remember.
Yeah. And everybody there was like, this is like, do not move. Like, do not move and like marry this guy right now. Like you're going through this program. Like everybody told me it was a bad idea. And if I were to look at somebody in my position, I might tell them it was a bad idea too. But God just does things that don't make sense sometimes. And so
Mhm.
like the first time of you focusing on somebody else in rehab, like that was detrimental because you needed to focus on your healing. But also it's like God knows what we're going to do before we even do it. And he works through people too. He sends people. And V, I always say V is like the backslide police in my house. Like he does not let me do anything that's going to destroy myself. And I needed him at the time that he came because I had started to backslide again.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that with John and LJ is that they came into your life, like God put them in your life right at that point to just snatch you and ground you, and you're not going anywhere. Like now you're just growing up. Now you're not just like going all around. You're finally growing up. That energy is going up.
Yeah. I think like as far as like, do I ever think like I'm gonna have a drink again? As long as I'm talking to God, I'm not, like as long as I'm keeping this relationship with God, I'm not gonna have a drink again and I'm not gonna pick up a drug again. But like, let me tell you, if I'm not talking to God, and also though, like I can go a period of time because I've gone periods of times where like I think, or I forget. I get so busy in life that I forget to stop and appreciate God and say, thank you, God, like
Yeah.
today, and then I start acting out. Like I'm not drinking and I'm not using and doing the things, but like I do have these moments where like I'm being a little bit more snippy than what I could be. I'm not being very forgiving and loving and kind. Instead, I'm being a little bit of, I'm gonna judge you. I'm not leaving it to God to judge you and tell you what to do. I'm trying to do it.
Yeah.
And I think those are the days, and like those are the God moments where like I look at myself and I'm like, oh, like I've had to make amends in sobriety, like amends to John, amends to LJ. Like I apologized to my child.
That's so good.
Like I apologized to my child. And let me tell you, like there was not a lot of times that our parents apologized to us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's
It's
like
hard.
true and honest, like amends.
Yeah.
Um, and like I've learned to apologize to my child and admit when I'm wrong and apologize to John and admit when I'm wrong. And even though he's wrong, because let me tell you, it's hard dating somebody that's in a 12-step program and doing the things. Because when I make an amends to him for being mad at him for something that he did, I want him to make an amends back to me. And he doesn't always do it. He
Mm,
doesn't always do it. And it's like just trusting God, just
yeah.
being, God's person, being one of those people that follow God and just
Yeah. Being an
think.
example, doing what you're supposed to do, even if the other person isn't according to how you see fit.
Mhm. It's hard sometimes, but like I think that I don't know, this life. I was driving home today after, because like I texted my friend that, and then she's like, "You want to come over for dinner?" So I went over there for dinner because I was going to be alone with LJ tonight, and I was going crazy.
Yeah.
So I went over there for dinner and let the kids play, and then I was driving home, and I was just like, I started praying out loud in the car. I do that often, and I was just like, God, like allow me to like be more grateful. Allow me to like be grateful to you, and just continue to be grateful for to you, and have more open communication with you. And I said, Amen. And then I hear my 2-year-old in the back say, Amen. And it's like, I'm like, okay. And then I get home and I give him a bath, and put him to bed, and we do our prayer, and he prays at night. And it's just like
Oh my
the
goodness.
sweetest thing, like watching his 2 little tiny hands say, God, thank you. Amen.
Oh, he's watching you.
It's like, oh, and then some days I'm like, you want me to pray or you want to pray? And he's like, no, I want dad to pray. And it's like a cool thing because he makes us, he's reminding us like, hey.
Wow. Oh,
Mm-hmm,
I'm so excited for when the time comes when I have a little
mm-hmm.
bop.
Mhm. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And he has these little friends and they all pray together, like we're sitting at dinner and they pray, or we go to our friend's house and they're praying before lunch, and it's like so cute. Or like we're praying. Like the first time that I knew that he knew how to pray, I didn't even know because I'm praying with my eyes closed. And then my sponsor nudged me and I opened my eyes and the boys are sitting there and they're
No way.
like a year and a half old and they're sitting there with their hands closed
Oh
and
my
hands together. And I was like,
Wow.
mhm. It's just such an amazing thing to like watch God work through me, work through him, and
Yeah.
work through everybody in my life.
Yeah, yeah. I think when you have a kid too, like a little baby that's yours, it's easier to see those God moments through
Hmm.
their eyes too and through their experiences.
And it's like he's my kid. God trusted, it's God's kid, really. It's God's kid, and God trusted me to be the mother to this kid. And like on those days when I want to like think like I'm not the best mom or I'm not doing things,
Oh my gosh.
God trusts me with this child. God
Yeah.
trusts me with this child. And I'm doing it.
Wow. I have those moments even as a wife where I'm
Mhm.
like, sometimes I self-deprecate and I'm like, I don't know, maybe somebody could love him better. Like, I'm really bad at this. And I'm like, wait, God obviously trusted me to be the one to do this.
Mhm.
So I can do it.
Yep, I can do it.
Aw.
Man, these men are hard sometimes. So
I know. Yeah, yeah,
keeping God in the center is a good thing.
for sure. Yeah.
I
Is
think
there
that's
anything else if you're thinking like who might watch this? Is there any final things that you'd want to share with them?
I want to say, like, because when I first started, the God word was really scary. When I first started this whole thing, the God word was so scary. And like, I didn't know what God was. All I knew was that my dad hated God. That's
Mm.
all I knew. I knew what he was. That's a lie. I knew, but I knew that my dad hated God and like he had to hate me too because look what all I was doing. Even if you don't call him God right now, just believe in something higher than yourself, and put your faith in that and eventually maybe you'll get there.
That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this show, I'd love to have you leave a review, share it with a friend, and even connect with me on other platforms. It's at Michaela Nikolenko on Instagram and TikTok, and we also have an at Raised and Redeemed Instagram account too. I look forward to connecting with you there. Until next time, stay well and God bless you.